I'm Liz Gunn from New Zealand Loyal, a party for the people of New Zealand and a party that stands to defend private property rights in this country. New Zealanders are experiencing an ever-increasing encroachment on and even the destruction of what should be your unalienable rights. With the full-blown support of both wealthy and impoverished Kiwis, New Zealand Loyal will restore your rights. Further, we will ensure that never again will your private property rights be attacked for any reason whatsoever. As things currently stand in our broken country, private property rights are really a thing of the past, and evidence of this exists everywhere you look. One glaring example is the seizure of property for patently dubious reasons like the SNAs, or the significant natural areas on farmland. This theft, and yes, that's exactly what it is, theft, is based on the so-called climate change narrative, which millions of humans worldwide are now calling out as a giant hoax. So what is a significant natural area as defined by this deceptive government? Well, it often involves a large tract of land, taking it from the landowner under the state's excuse that it has some indefinable natural significance. The land then, in effect, becomes unusable for any purpose. In essence, the actual owner of that land is barred from using it. However, along with that, and in the current twisted state overreach into our lives, that same poor landowner is still expected to pay for the upkeep and for the rates on that land for which that owner no longer has any beneficial use. How can this be fair or justified? Let's imagine you purchase a particular property on a certain day, and then suddenly you find out that a new government policy means that without any consultation, the government now has the ability to take your house and land for some pet project, let's say a new motorway. You're then forced to sell the government your home, in most cases at a loss, while at the same time dealing with the upheaval of your family life, and all of this without you having recourse to real pushback against such injustice. The Kiwi owners of homes and of land have found their rights ebbing away through controlling, coercive legislation and bylaws, which can stop them from, for example, building a farm structure, from altering existing buildings, and even from defending their properties against criminals. We ask ourselves, how the hell did we get here? How did a government that was supposedly elected to represent and serve us suddenly become the dictator that barks orders at us? This was not by accident. This is all by design. The agendas underlying all these attacks on you are being driven by political puppets and their overlords, the murky and politically unaccountable supranational institutions that many of you are now discovering are no longer organizations set up for the good of the people of the world. And here we include the once trusted United Nations, the tyrannical, manipulative World Economic Forum, the Bill Gates-run World Health Organization, health in inverted commas. And then behind all these organizations, there are the shadowy, hidden from sight entities that actually control and pull the strings around the world. This world cabal wants to suggest that the attachment to private property is selfish by us. What manipulative rubbish that is. They support the WEF mantra, the World Economic Forum mantra, which we once laughed at, and now most of us shudder to hear. You shall own nothing and be happy. Make no mistake. Unless you reclaim your power and stand with us loyal Kiwis, loyal to our individual and private property rights, you too are going to lose everything. And if you think that any current wealth status will save you. Think again. They're coming for all of us. Your only hope to stop this property rights theft Armageddon, and that's no exaggeration, your only hope is to vote yourself back into power. And just how do you do that? You do it by electing those who will take the common will of you, the people, into Parliament. Elect those who will appoint critical thinking and people with huge courage and honesty and uncommon intelligence to facilitate your will in Parliament. New Zealand Loyal is here to manifest the will of the New Zealand people. We will listen to you. We will incorporate your views where they can help to achieve these following aims. The first, that the current ability of the state to freely trespass against your person or your property shall be extinguished. Unless evidence exists that you have committed a crime and thereby created a victim, there shall be no justifiable excuse to trespass against you. And the second is this: should you be subjected to an action that does trespass on your property rights with no just cause, then it will not take years and an intimidating and often insurmountable amount of legal fees to remedy that error. No longer will the power of the state be wielded in such an offensive and offending way. The state, your servants, shall exist to protect you and to ensure your life, your liberty, and the pursuit of your happiness are not impugned. As disheartening as it is, here is the truth. The current political class do not work for you, for us. Our 120 politicians in our current parliament are not our friends. They follow a script. They are told what to do. Regardless of the electioneering, the honeyed words, the empty promises, the cold, toothy grins, and the vote-grabbing incentives and bribes, answer me this: how many have ever truly delivered on those promises for you? You see, it's a game, and they know it's a game. And I think they know that many of us now know it's a game. The game stops when we, the people, stop playing their games or abiding in any way by their corrupted rules. And what are those rules? You know them. At election time, glib and insincere politicians who've had snouts in the public trough, sometimes for decades, sell you a product, a promise, which they have no intention of delivering on. Once in power, with no sincerity or consultation with you, they violate their promises to you. They kick sand in the face of your having trusted them on voting day. Let's think of an example. Well, what about Cindy and her vile capital gains tax promises to help Kiwis get on the property ladder? Once in power in her first term, suddenly one day she simply announces that that policy is cancelled. The trusting voters could do nothing about her lying to them. And this pattern happens every election cycle. You would think somehow we would each have learned by now not to trust them. In truth, the bureaucrats really run the show. They decide what passes as legislation and what does not. Do you honestly believe the current bunch of politicians have the intellectual capacity to conceive, draft, and rush through under urgency all the pieces of legislation that directly violate what should be your unalienable rights? The huge volume of laws rushed through during these last 2 terms under Labour took the bureaucrats a massive amount of effort to prepare, even though, of course, no similar effort was put into consulting with you, the people, about whether we even wanted such laws. Take Labour. sanctioning the ability to abort a Kiwi baby right up to 9 months in utero. I spoke about this a couple of messages ago to you. Whoever gave them permission to do that? Where were the public debates on this? When were Kiwis consulted? When I stated in my policy overviews message to you initially that New Zealand Loyal is not interested in being an also-ran party, I really meant that. What we want to do is to deliver a crushing, decisive blow to the establishment and its globalist controllers. When all of you vote loyal and you deliver a majority in doing so, we can play them at their under urgency game. I mean, imagine the bureaucratic leeches sent packing under urgency once we are in, and being issued with gumboots and spades and having to go out to do their contract time in Hawke's Bay, where they can help to dig out silted up homes and vineyards and farms. Being banned from Parliament, they will no longer have the ability to inflict the ongoing damage to Kiwi lives through their oppressive mountains of rushed-through legislation. A full decentralization of power will take place under your loyal government. Have you noticed the pattern of the last decades? That the more they have centralized power under the empty verbiage of efficiency and cost-effectiveness, the more your rights have been extinguished? And we're all noticing that our wallets are now increasingly emptied out by the government taxes, which seem to grow endlessly, decade upon decade. New Zealand Loyal will ensure that our farmers are released from restrictive regulations. Kiwi farmers must be left free of state over-interference so they can farm and produce the way they always have, following Kiwi best practices, in fact world best practices in many cases. There's a reason our farmers, like their Dutch brothers and sisters, are regarded as some of the world's most efficient and most capable farmers. As with every other home and landowner, our farmers need to know that they're able to defend their property, their family, and their business without being held liable when someone unstable decides to attempt to take or damage what is not theirs, or worse still, to attempt to harm anyone on that farm property. Without the ability to live freely on land here in New Zealand and to be sustained by that land without a government nanny state of way too much regulation and interference, we, as Kiwis, are viewed as somehow controllable by these tyrannical and dictatorial governments who do the bidding of the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. That is the reason private property rights are now increasingly under attack in New Zealand. And private property rights are inextricably linked with the other rights which people in a free country should enjoy. Think of the fundamental issue of law and order and how property rights weave in there, such as the right to self-defense, the right to protection from unlawful trespass, the right to own land without fearing arbitrary seizure of that land. Criminals are a law unto themselves. Laws are meant to be made to hold at bay the criminal element in our society, and that in turn will protect the unalienable God-given rights and freedoms that all of us who are law-abiding should enjoy. But instead, continual corrupted governments here in New Zealand are now using the law against our freedom. Just look at our punitive Labour government of the last miserable 6 years. They're using the law incorrectly to oppress, to control, to diminish good and reasonable Kiwis just wanting to live our lives responsibly and in freedom. Why are decent people around the world now subjected to restrictive laws which seem to stop their lives flowing smoothly while criminals get free rein? It's both counterproductive and counterintuitive. So when you vote for New Zealand Loyal, all of this is going to change. You'll be voting for your way of life. You'll be voting for your country. And you'll be voting for your freedom when you vote New Zealand Loyal. In reality, it's no exaggeration to say that the people in New Zealand at this upcoming election will in fact be voting for our very lives. The voters who go in and fill in that paper ballot on the day, please remember the Dominion computer vote is highly questionable and it will need investigation for possible corruption in the system once we get in. So when you go in to vote on the day of the election, you, in effect, become the jury. Your vote will be your judgment. So will you vote on the side of freedom? Will you vote to live without government control and relentless interference? Or will you vote on the side of tyranny by voting for the Greens, for Labour, for National, or for ACT? All of them, remember, are servants of the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, and the United Nations, instead of serving the interests of the people of New Zealand. Consider this example. Under New Zealand Loyal, the rating system will become a thing of the past. Each of you who owns land should be able to decide which of the available goods or services you wish to contract with your local council on. None of you should be forced to pay for services that you do not in fact receive. And of course, rates reform is crucial in light of the LGFA, the Local Government Funding Agency system, which I highlighted to you in my last message. Councils under a New Zealand Loyal government will be prevented from using your land as collateral for any debt they incur from borrowing for often very wasteful council spending. If you purchase a property, that property should be free of all encumbrances, and you should have the deeds to that property, not just a title that provides a status as occupier. The records of the correct landowners shall be kept not for extortion purposes to extract yet more capital from you. Those records shall be kept solely for the purposes of ensuring that no other person shall be able to claim the land on which you are legally entitled to live. All current lands that have been subject to and affected by the vast bureaucratic overreach in the fabricated name of SNAs, or those significant natural areas I spoke of earlier, all of those shall be returned. No debate, no arguments. No one should be subject to the forfeiture of any land based on agendas 2020, 2030, or any other ridiculous agenda that has not been discussed with Kiwis, but rather has been imposed by a sold-out puppet politicians by their World Economic Forum and United Nations masters. The way to an actual, kind society is not through the top-down, coerced and dictated stripping of us, the people, of the things that we need in order to meet our basic needs. That is the way of the cabal of dictators. It's odd, isn't it, that tyranny always leads to a self-loathing society, because those who go along with what they know to be wrong for their lives are doomed quite quickly to become bitter people who know they've betrayed themselves and betrayed their own family's quality of life. Now, I think the real way to a kind society is a libertarian way, where society flourishes from the bottom up in a sort of organic growth of that society, in which people are allowed, for the most part, to keep their resources and to tend to their own needs. And as we are, the majority of us, social beings who genuinely care about others, then once we feel secure, we will naturally give to others, and will care for those whose present circumstances make it difficult to see to their own basic needs. When our hands are not tied behind our backs by tyrants in charge, we each will thrive. And when we thrive, we'll willingly give others that hand up. So true kindness is not a prerogative of the so-called liberal progressives. In fact, many now say it's those groups who are behaving as fascists once did, not listening to the people, using far too much control and government interference, so that there is a stifling of creativity, of free thinking, of free exchange of ideas, and with all that, a crushing of joy and a crushing of success. No, true kindness is actually a deeply held value of people who tend conservative. It all depends really on the road taken to create a kind society. One way, the globalist way, leads to totalitarianism, top-down control. The other, our way, leads to a genuinely healthy and happy society bubbling up from the ground level up. And so we see people across the world waking up to the tyranny and the corruption that has infected our nations. People are rejecting it, and they're rejecting it in their millions. I reiterate this crucial thought, and I ask you to hold it in your mind's eye. This coming election is the most important election of your life. And in fact, you will be voting for your very lives. By voting New Zealand Loyal, you're voting yourself back in power. The corruption and tyranny end when you decide that they end. The time to end their tyranny and corruption, that time is now.
There was a handful of police and they nipped in to stop it and nip it in the bud. And they very nearly did. But as soon as it swelled and the numbers were there, you saw it on their face, the panic, they backed right off. And it was such a perfect example of strength in numbers, this stuff is only enforceable because there's not enough people standing up. As soon as enough people stand up, it's over.